Hey everybody, welcome to Myopia Movies. This week we start a Dan-tastic episode by visiting the Stuart Gordon classic Reanimator. If you have not seen this is kind of B horror, but it's done in like the most incredible way. And Stuart Gordon is one of those auteur types that if you know good horror, you know Stuart Gordon. So I hope you appreciate this breakdown of what is our Daniel Sudis regular, our co-host, our producer. It's his theme month, the first of several, as all of us will have a theme month. So please enjoy. Thanks for doing all you do to keep us on charts by sharing and retweeting and posting and reviewing and doing all those things that let the audience out abroad know that we are important. Thanks, everyone. Welcome to Myopia Movies. This week, well, actually, I'm going to let Daniel take over here in a second because this week is all about Sudsy. Mr. Sudis, can you take us over?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Myopia Movies. This week, we're talking about a movie that explores concepts of life, death, and oral sex. I am Sudsy, a frequent annoyance of Nick on this very podcast, and I do have a job in a sideshow. And on panel, we've got Mr. Matt Quinn.
Atlanta horror author, buy my books.
And Mr. Nick Hoffman.
I'm just a fat guy naked on an operating table.
All right, so this week we're talking about Stuart Gordon and Brian Yuzna's Reanimator, based on the H.P. Lovecraft story. I've seen this movie maybe about a dozen times, and I love this thing. It's hard to really describe why. I mean, it's just so over the top for one, but it's also a lot more creative than it has any right to be. Was this your guys' first time seeing the movie?
It was my first time seeing the entire thing. I've seen bits of it before, and of course, it's hard to find a more iconic horror movie cover than since the 1950s, with that like green, like glow stick ooze. But like, this might be the first time I've sat down and watched the whole thing.
All right. What about you, Matt?
This is the first time I've seen the whole movie.
Okay. Well, then let's go ahead and start with you, Matt. What did you think as a first-timer?
The movie is notorious for that scene you referenced, but that scene is only about 30 seconds long. Most of the movie is Herbert West is an asshole and he corrupts Dan.
Yeah, that's not entirely wrong.
And everybody is patronizing, condescending, or domineering towards poor Megan, who seems to be the only one who recognized how much of a problem Herbert West is.
She, of course, doesn't have a penis. That's the problem, you understand. Hence why nobody's listening to her.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, and we should just mention here, if you have not seen this, it's not impossible to find, but you'd be better off buying a used DVD or Blu-ray, because who knows when it's going to disappear again.
Yeah, I saw it on Tubi.
Yeah, but exactly. I have nothing against Tubi, but it's not like Tubi is going to be around forever. I rented it from Amazon. But again, it's just find an old DVD. It's what you need. What was I going to say? Oh, but it's just weird. I love how 1980s it is, but it's not just that it's 1980s. It's that it's like a 1950s movie made in the 1980s, and it's Stuart Gordon. So it's like there were no squibs in Hollywood, for they were all in this picture. Like, it's just, there's blood for no reason. And at one point, there's a lobotomized zombie that drools what I would imagine is red food coloring glucose and applesauce. And that's all that he's drooling. And it's just chunky love. It's amazing.
No, I love the practical effects in this.
There's a scene that reminds me of The Thing at the very end.
John Carpenter's The Thing.
The prehensile guts.
Previous episode. Now, we should mention that these actors are all known for being in this movie. And in fact, looking at IMDb as we are speaking, which we're doing as I'm speaking, Bruce Abbott, who plays Dan, his profile picture is from Reanimator 2, so that's even worse.
The Bride of Reanimator. That is an even weirder movie somehow.
It's a very strange
movie. Jeffrey Combs and Bruce Abbott getting back together, and they find his girlfriend's heart after the events of this movie and decide to recreate a woman out of dead tissue using using Herbert West's formula.
And what's crazier is Matt was talking about, well, what if I set into the world a movie wherein there was Switzerland like the end of this movie? And I'm like, just make your own Frankenstein nonsense. Because this is
but then no one knows what, everyone knows Reanimator, What If. No one knows Matt's Switzerland Zombie Festival. This hypothetical would have name recognition if I could finagle the rights to the characters. It would not if I made it up myself. Hollywood IP crap.
Are you saying that Reanimator has more name recognition than Frankenstein?
It has more name recognition than me.
Yes, but you could just make a Frankenstein sequel that has all the things you said, because Frankenstein is in the public domain.
It's up for grabs.
Yeah, because Lovecraft let anybody do whatever with his ideas, but the stuff that's unique to this movie is probably copyright.
To be fair, H.P. Lovecraft would let anybody do anything to his work so long as they were white.
Yes, and he has been long dead, and I don't know what his estate says.
His estate doesn't care either, I don't think. Because I was very specifically told Lovecraft was fine, Conan was not.
I mean, so go ahead, you can try. I would assume Frankenstein has more name recognition than Reanimator. That's just me as someone who, is in the world. But as I was saying, Dave Gale, who plays Dr. Hill, his picture's just his head in the doctor's bag. Al Berry, who plays Dr. Gruber, is him as a zombie. So all these dudes are just known for this movie, which is great. I love this shit. It's like looking at the actors from American movie, and you're just like, oh, they did this. Great.
You're the Trekkie sitting here, Nick. Jeffrey Combs has been in a bunch of Star Trek stuff, hasn't he?
Jeffrey Combs has, and he's the kind of notable exception, which is, I mean, he kind of holds this series down. He's especially active in Deep Space Nine, but he's in, I believe, The Frighteners, right?
Yes, he is.
That's a movie we should definitely be doing at some point. Every time we think about ending the show, which again would never happen anytime soon, I'm just like, oh right, that one. I mean, this movie it's such a lark. I don't even know. Like, it's gruesome and is definitely R-rated for a good reason, but it almost shouldn't be because of how silly it is. It's just, like, I don't know how to put it. It makes no sense. It's remarkable. I love it.
So let's go ahead and start at the beginning, which is a cold open with Herbert West studying in Zurich, where he brings his dead professor back to life and causes his head to explode.
In there.
I tried watching this on a plane once. I had it download on my tablet, and I get to that scene. I look at the person next to me, and like, I probably shouldn't be watching this because I might traumatize fellow passengers. But I mean, I kind of admire just how direct the movie's opening is. It's like, all right, if this isn't the sort of thing you like, where you're going to see eyes bug out practically, again, it's all makeup and effects. This is long before CGI became a thing. Go ahead and bail out now. And Jeffrey Combs is already just really selling it as Herbert West. He's aloof. He's uncaring. Everyone else in the room is horrified. And he's just like, well, of course he's dead. The dosage was too low with practically no emotion.
Yeah,
it's a great introduction to the character.
Well, he plays it very, like, maybe Aspergery, but it's supposed to be Victor Frankenstein, right? Like directly, right. Like, it's about this science. He doesn't really care. He's aloof, right? Meanwhile, like, you're underselling it, man. Like, I know it's Stuart Gordon, and Stuart Gordon's kind of known for this shit, but if you guys don't know, like, this is almost Scanners level. Like, he's twitching, like they're throwing just chunks at walls at various points, and there's
I'll pull a Nick and talk about goo, because there's so much goo in this movie.
There is quite a bit of goo. It's not even blood; it's goo. We will definitely get to all the goo, as you said.
Not goo, goo.
Of course, I apologize for mispronouncing it. Well, after that, West somehow escapes Swiss prison. It never really explains how, but he's back at Miskatonic University, which we've got a horror writer here who definitely gets that joke. And I I had forgotten this, or I'm not sure if I ever knew this, but apparently Arkham is a thing that H.P. Lovecraft invented and not Batman.
Yeah. So Arkham, Massachusetts is this kind of fictional area where a lot of it's not always where his stuff is based, but it's like where, for example, in Mouth of Madness, excuse me.
At the Mountains of Madness.
At the Mountains of Madness, it's where the expedition sails out from, so to speak.
Alrighty.
Yeah, so Arkham is the city, and Miskatonic is the university where it's based. It's also where things like the Dunwich Horror come from. Yada yada yada. It's kind of the, if it were the X-Files, it would be the FBI. If it was Indiana Jones, it'd be the fictional West Coast College where he comes from.
If it was Stephen King, it'd be Maine.
Right. It's so that there's like a haunted town, and the university adds an air of academia. So these aren't just quacks; these are people on an expedition.
Yeah, the website I'm not allowed to talk about anymore calls Lovecraft Country refers to a very specific part of Massachusetts. It's
have
like
creepy.
Have
you read a lot of Lovecraft, Matt?
Yeah, a lot of Lovecraft and more of his people who played with it later.
Yeah.
Now, why haven't there been more Lovecraft movies?
Well, I mean, he has a problem with racism, but also it works better as a slow burn. And in fact, if you've seen the first X-Files movie, other than the Oklahoma City stuff, it stinks a lot of Lovecraft because it's the slow expedition to Antarctica. They're digging down deep. They find a mysterious ancient evil. Same with The Thing. It's Lovecraft adjacent. It's just reading Lovecraft, which I have and I've enjoyed. It reads a lot more like you're reading ancient myth. For those of you who are listening and reading and watching along with us, it's SCP stuff. Like, it's a lot of like diary entries, and it's epistolary, and they're digging into these ancient evils. It's not action packed a lot of the time. It's slow burn stuff.
And the prose is very chewy and very purple.
It's good. Purple
prose, like overwritten, like squamous.
I thought you were talking some hippie nonsense I didn't understand.
Well, there were Lovecraft adaptations of the 60s, like the Dunwich Horror. So maybe there's some hippie stuff going on too.
Yeah. No, I mean,
have you ever looked at the book bound in human skin? I mean, really looked at it, man.
The Necronomicon? What is another Lovecraft thing?
Necronomicon is supposed to be at Miskatonic as well. So there you go. I don't know what to tell you, but that's the fact. Do you want to give the plot synopsis, Sudsy?
Yeah, going ahead. I was trying to walk us through it, but let's go ahead and get just right into what it's all about.
Yeah, so as you kind of mentioned, Herbert West, after fleeing Switzerland under mysterious circumstances, it's the 80s. Maybe, I don't know. He was smuggled in some sort of ambassador pouch. He was in a diplomatic pouch. Anyway, he ends up at like Miskatonic, and he immediately is an asshole to everyone he meets, including other professors. There's an autopsy scene, which we'll get into, where he's just like, "Professor, why do you lie to people?" And he's breaking pencils like a dipshit. He finds lodging with our heroes, including Dan and Megan, where I assume he immediately kills their cat before resurrecting the cat using this kind of nonsense. Go ahead, Matt.
I'm kind of wondering about that, because Herbert West's whole MO is he is brutally honest and abrasive. Does he ever actually lie?
I get the feeling he's brutally honest.
He's just offensive and doesn't have any filter at all.
Yes, but doesn't mean he's honest. I interpret him as Victor Frankenstein, which is that he's doing whatever he can to prove his genius, and sometimes that means being honest, and sometimes that means getting around people so that he can continue his experiments. Because he does lie.
The way he plays it to me is he just doesn't care about other. He's forgotten why he invented the reagent in the first place, which is to presumably save lives and revolutionize medicine. But then he started looking at what he was doing more as just collecting data as opposed to helping people. It was all analytical.
Well, Daniel, that's why I interpret it the same way, because like to me, he's lying about the cat because he wants to continue his experiments, and he thinks that if they find out he killed the cat, they'll stop him from the experimentation, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, the rest of this is him slowly, accelerating, right? He then tries to resurrect a corpse. Then it turns out that, there's a doctor who's Megan's dad, tackles him. He dies
He's
in
the
the
dean of the
skirmish.
university. He's the dean of the university.
And in so doing, the guy dies. He's resurrected and turned into a zombie. But the weird pervert professor, who we'll get to, who's just sniffing all of Megan's panties, comes across it. He's really interested in the reagent. And so Herbert cuts off his head, and then hilarity ensues.
Yeah, because
that's kind of the teaser.
Yeah, Hill tries to blackmail him alone in the basement of Doom, and he turns his back on Herbert, who then goes at him with a shovel.
Was that an honest thing too, Matt?
Well, I would say extreme provocation. Hill was blackmailing him.
But see, like that's why I'm saying I don't think he's telling the truth. I think he's just doing whatever he can to complete his research, which again is very Victor Frankenstein. This is not a thing about the autism thing, which you were kind of alluding to earlier, the Aspergery thing. No. This is just pure violence, because he's afraid someone might take away his ability to research, which is just.
I'm wondering who's worse, Pervert Professor or West, because Pervert Professor is a plagiarist and a stalker and later an attempted rapist, and Herbert's just an asshole.
Well, Herbert is the guy who stops the head rape in question.
I will also argue with you. He does murder 3 people.
Aren't they already dead?
He just flat out murder the professor?
He does
dean,
indeed
he murders
murder
the dean,
Professor
he cuts
Hill.
the head off the professor. Right? That's
because I thought Dr. Halsey was killed by the zombie, which he created.
Yeah, I think we're starting to get something there, Matt.
I mean, eventually the evil professor, is a rapist, and he does resurrect a bunch of bodies, and one of those bodies does kill Megan, but that's 1 death to 3. I don't know. And what I will say too is I don't think. Well, it's a Stuart Gordon thing. The morality is very skewed. Like, this isn't Carpenter or who's the guy who did Halloween?
That's John Carpenter.
Who did Friday? It doesn't matter. My brain is just completely rebooted. Hi, I'm Nick.
You mean Wes Craven?
Wes. I was gonna say Wes, and I'm like, no, that's the character from the movie. Wes Craven. It's not a Craven or Carpenter where it's just an old like Puritan morality play. The virgins and the sober people survive and everyone else dies for being too horny. No, this is just kind of like, people are evil, but people are all evil. So what if this dude with a German haircut? It's okay. But yeah, so that's kind of the plot in a nutshell.
Well, it kind of is. I've actually found the short stories and read them, and it kind of is like it's structured the same way. It's basically just, okay, Herbert West tries to resurrect this corpse, and here's how that goes wrong. Now we're going to cut to a completely different thing, because it was all serialized. Like, it was never one book. It was just like a series of stories published in cheap literary magazines.
Well, and to me, that's kind of why, I mean, Matt, your question earlier, something like a Lovecraft Country works pretty well, because like, again, in At the Mountain Madness is also epistolary. It's written like diary entries, which again, I enjoy, very much like SCP stuff. I've read a bunch of his short stories as well, also generally epistolary. So why not just do it in like intersecting stuff? Makes sense to me.
The Creep Show, like an anthology film,
or a TV show.
That was the original plan, was make it a 13-episode TV show, but they said there was no market for it.
Well, but that's what Lovecraft Country, the show, is.
He means, I think this movie was originally meant to be a TV show, which I don't think would have worked.
No, I agree with you
Uh,
there. It's
Quite
too
honestly,
short.
back in the 80s. That and they just couldn't have done on TV what they did in the movie.
See, my pitch though, Daniel, is 20% better because it's got even more breasts. What I would do is make the main character the dean, and then make it an Animal House-esque comedy based at Miskatonic University. And sometimes that Chug-a-Lug house is just out of control. Sometimes there are zombies. Sometimes there's an adventure down to Antarctica, but sometimes it's just a panty raid. And then everyone's
Robot
like,
House.
right,
That would have been
yes.
interesting. A
Yeah.
zombie
And
a
then like,
zombie frat house comedy. So the dean of the school would have been a resurrected dead member of the Pretenders in this
and then when they
pitch.
do the panty raid, every so often there'd be like a bra with 3 cups because maybe it's a monster. Who knows? And then like it's 20% stranger.
So
Right.
maybe, yeah, that's when people. It's like some Weekend at Bernie's 2 thing where he's resurrected. So end of season 1, Herbert West kills Dr. Halsey, or he dies in some idiotic accident Herbert West causes. So then they resurrect him. It's like Weekend at Bernie's 2, where he's like kind of alive, kind of not.
Oh my god. And then one time Herbert West is in like another class because he's a student, right? And so he's like in a math class. He's working on his formula while also doing the math, and some like jock is next to him in class and tries to copy his notes, but accidentally copies the formula, and then hilarity ensues when instead of making hunch punch, he makes resurrection juice, and all the zombies show up at the party. Oh no! Yeah.
And this was supposed to be a comedy, yes, because it's so ridiculous.
It was?
Yeah, it's described as a horror comedy.
I mean, there are funny moments. I don't know if I'd describe it as a comedy, but it's also Stuart Gordon. Have you ever seen Invisible Maniac? I think is his too.
No, I haven't.
So brace yourself. It's the Invisible Man instead of Frankenstein. Someone chokes to death on a submarine sandwich.
Well, I mean, who was it? One of the producers and writers. Well, no, just one of the producers, Brian Usna, of this is the guy who directed Society later,
which is a movie that I've seen, and it's good, and I never need to see it again.
The Shunting,
yeah. Oh my god!
Is the Shunting better or worse than the naked zombie murder festival at the end of this movie?
Worse in by what metric are we measuring it here?
More nauseating.
Oh yeah, big time.
Significantly more nauseating. I can rewatch Reanimator. I never need to see the Shunting again.
Yeah, because the end of this movie, so much blood and man ass.
Okay, well, if the man ass is bothering you, that's another problem.
There is a lot of man ass in the Shunting sequence though too. So hey,
there is. I also love the old like 80s. Like I'm surprised Boomy the Boom Mic doesn't make a cameo appearance, but like it's some very harsh, like almost daytime TV studio lighting. And so like you can see the refraction off every single like belly hair off all those dudes. I also love how like clearly a lot of the prosthetics are very hard to move in. So like especially at the end, the zombies at the end is like that scene, like it didn't like shock me, but like it was a good twist. It was a good like solid twist. But like there's several women who are, supposed to be like middle age, kind of heavy, and like sometimes their boobs have special effects, sometimes they don't, like not special effects, added stuff like gore to them, and it's just like a bunch of like flailing around like sacks of just anger. And so like you have dudes waving around paunches, occasionally one like ripped dude throwing people through walls. It's nuts. And by the way, I think we all saw the first season of Evil Dead, or Walking Dead rather. More of these zombies, I would have watched the show much longer.
Yeah.
I don't need the hyper-realism. I just need the crazy nonsense. And this is so much crazy nonsense. I love it. I love it.
So, does anybody have a particular favorite zombie or favorite moments? I mean, we hit all the major plot points. The dean gets killed and comes back. Professor Hill tries to steal the reagent and gets murdered.
I
Uh,
think let's just walk back through it just a skosh. Like, I think the scene that really turns the whole plot. I mean, Wes shows up like a fucking creep. You know, Megan hooks up with her boyfriend. There's a sex scene immediately, which is good because she hides her breasts for a third act reveal. Chekhov's titties. But we should mention here that Wes shows up at the door like he is in Frankenstein. He's like, "Hello, I've heard you had a room for rent." Unblinking and very terrifying. He goes, "I can pay right now. All of my money is on me in Swiss francs." And they're like,
oh, and the fact that a woman flat out tells him that he creeps her out, he just doesn't even pay attention to it.
he goes, "Reagan's America," and slams her in the face.
Yes.
But the movie really gets going then. I guess, which happens first? I think it's the autopsy scene. Because the autopsy scene is nuts.
You're talking about when the professor is peeling the head?
Right. Which,
like peeling a large orange.
Because that's when West starts messing with Dr. Hill because he says Dr. Hill plagiarized his mentor.
Right. Well, they were introduced beforehand, and then Professor Hill, and that's where he accused him of plagiarism in his own little Herbert West way. And then in class, Herbert's disrupting it when Hill is talking about brain death and how it dies 6 to 12 minutes after other vital organs cease to function.
And he's passive aggressing like a little bitch because he's just breaking pencils and he goes, "Why do you tell such lies?" And you're just like, who the fuck is this kid? I should also mention that, to me at least, Stuart Gordon is having a little bit of fun because this scene to me is exactly the autopsy scene from Young Frankenstein, right? Where the guy, he's trying to make all the people pass out, and so he's being unnecessarily graphic. And I believe the last scene of it is the scene that ends this movie, where he's like, "Oh, very good, you're still conscious," with a guy who looks exactly like West, and he goes, "So here's the intestine," and he cuts out the intestine and starts throwing it at the guy until he faints at the end. But he even makes one student faint by cutting around the head, cutting open the skull, and pulling out the brain and handing it to the kid so he passes out.
Like the Starship Troopers autopsy of the bug scene.
I was wondering when you were going to mention that.
Young Frankenstein is 74, baby.
Let's keep throwing guts at Carmen until she pukes.
Yeah.
Dude, I love Starship Troopers. That's about to come out on Arrow in 4K.
It is?
Yeah, I need to get it.
Oh.
I love that film.
Oh, holy hell, I need to get that too.
I don't know which one of his films I like more, that or RoboCop, but they're close.
I gotta go with RoboCop, but
I need to rewatch RoboCop. It's been years. It's been years. Roll, and see, hey. So that scene is so like, "I am smarter than you, Professor," and he's breaking his little pencils, and the professor's like, "Really, dipshit?" And
now you're both teachers. You're both teachers. Have you ever had to deal with a student like that?
Matt?
Breaking pencils, no.
Oh, dude, I've had to chew out students before. I have my teacher voice, and they know it. It's a lot.
My students are usually less subtle than breaking pencils.
It's funny though. I mean, we're speaking of no dignity right now. I went to campus. I had to grab something. I was dropping off some things. I have and this is just for people who know and might be cut even. About 3 years ago, there was a terrorist attack on the French version of The Onion called Charlie Hebdo, and I have the first issue back after that terrorist attack, which I had framed and I was going to put in my classroom. I also just had some shit to drop off, and I ran into a student, and I was like, "I'm just going to be there for 5 minutes." I didn't realize how busy campus was going to be. So I show up in some pants from like some shorts, like sweat shorts, a Mario Kart t-shirt, and I'm just walking through campus in my Birks. And it says like Dr. Hoffman, and I'm like, "Hey, you! How you doing, student?" So you give kind of a sideways hug and you run off because I'm just like, I am not meant to be seen by humans. I hope I put on deodorant this morning, but who knows? It's summer break. You look like a teenage adult, and I need to leave this situation.
When a teacher dresses like that, I just assume they have tenure and leave it at that.
I do. I'm a doctor. You see,
Ah, there
I'm
you
a
go.
doctor, and I've been working on resurrecting people. So there
Ah,
you go.
full circle.
Oh, God help me. All right. So, Matt, you, with your furrowed brow, your Frankenstein-esque expression, describe the scene with the cat.
Okay, that the cat's whole cat sequence reminds me of The Howling. Like when that woman is skulking around the werewolf colony looking for the files, Megan is looking for the cat, and she
Well,
finds the dead cat in Herbert West's refrigerator, and West proceeds to throw a massive hissy fit about her getting in his stuff.
you've got a cat corpse in there. Maybe we should lead with that. No, it's real interesting because that's a part of the reason the movie works for me is because of that scene with Rufus. It's clearly like a stuffed animal. That thing never looked alive, but everyone is just totally dedicated to it. And frankly, I like when actors do that, even in the face of ridiculousness. Sometimes it works well, like it does here, and I think it works well because some of the other effects are so good that you can overlook them cheating a little bit. Other times it doesn't work well, but it's still so damn entertaining.
Yeah, like this movie isn't that long, and there's not any dead space. It's just, Herbert West shows up and first starts with blackmail and then cajoles Dan into helping him with his shenanigans, and people start dying and they don't stay dead.
Well, he shows the reagent off to the cat and reanimates him, and the cat goes nuts. Dan is convinced that Herbert has found a way to effectively bring the dead back to life. And then, of course, when he takes it to the dean of the school at first, the dean subsequently rescinds Dan's student loan and expels Herbert, which is probably the right move.
Yeah, I don't think Dr. Halsey is being entirely rational here because I think he's aware that Dan is involved with his daughter and that just pisses him off.
Oh, involved with his daughter. You mean plowing her regularly?
Yeah, and while being completely oblivious how much of an evil, perverted creep Dr. Hill is.
Now, there's actually a director's cut out there that Arrow put out on their release. I'm not sure if it was just in the like limited special edition or if it's still out there, but it's like got maybe about 15 to 20 minutes extra footage, and a lot of that is Dr. Hill apparently has the power to hypnotize people.
Yeah, that's overkill. I mean, Herbert West can raise the dead and Dr. Hill can mind control people. It was simpler in the standard cut that he just was lobotomizing people.
Yes, it was. But and when I say he was hypnotizing people, I mean he would just stare at them really intently, and then the music would get all weird. Plus, I think there was an extra dinner scene in there with Dr. Hill showing up at the dean's house, and there's some extra dialogue between him and Meg, where Meg is very aware of how creepy he is.
I mean, you can tell from her reactions when he's like makes this weird poetic toast to how hot she is, and she's like,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think the longer cut is necessarily better, but it was pretty amusing to see.
Yeah, so it's probably better that Halsey is just overprotective and pissy and oblivious to his colleague than that Dr. Hill is mind controlling everyone already.
Yeah, because that's another big subplot is he's trying to figure out how to kill parts of the brain to make slaves, basically.
Yeah, that's some Dahmer crap there. I mean, again, that's why I think Hill is worse than West. West is just for science, and who cares of anyone else? Hill is just vile.
Yes, he is. It is quite satisfying when they put a shovel through his neck. I'm not gonna lie. Right after that scene where Herbert's expelled, they sneak into the morgue at the university to do an unauthorized experiment. Halsey, the dean, finds out about it and is going to stop them, but not before they reanimate that beefcake that they reanimate. I seem to recall reading somewhere that guy might have been Arnold Schwarzenegger's stunt double at one point.
Well, that's
The
something
act-
I'd have to look into because he's certainly, in good shape.
well, anyway, I mean, if you talk about man-ass, I mean, I know Matt's got a thing for that, but if you're a fan of man-ass, then this zombie is going to give you plenty of that.
I have my, at Matthew W. Quinn running commentary in the movie, and he beats up Halsey, but Halsey, how do they know he's dead?
Halsey?
Yeah, I doubt Herbert West would care over much, but let's just, he's not talking. Let's inject him with my green goo.
That's just part of what they do in this. I think they checked his pulse at one point, and or checked his head and noticed that his skull had been fractured or something. But anyway, they bring Halsey back to life, and he goes nuts. And then Dr. Hill has Halsey committed to a mental institution.
Yeah, he cajoles Megan into signing off on it. Like, and if you're ever lonely, Megan.
Now, this actor gave me real Boris Karloff vibes, which is great. I think we said his name earlier. It's David Gale.
He's
And
good.
he unfortunately died way too young. And he wasn't in as many films as you would think, especially after this. But one movie he was in was one of Matt's favorites, The Guyver.
Which one was he?
Fulton
Oh,
Balkus.
oh, the evil old guy who runs a corporation and is slightly less perverted. Just
Yes.
slightly.
Well, and I was just going to toss out there, he's not the only one because Jeffrey Combs is also in there as Dr. East.
Oh, yeah, that was bad.
I'm so glad you're on it tonight, Matt. But I will just add, they both have old man face because when the movie was made, they must have only been in their late 40s, but they're like, I mean, and maybe it's just the difference between being born 40 years before us, but like, I'm 37. I'm going to turn 38 this year, and I don't look nearly as old and perverted. Slightly old and perverted, sure, but not that old.
I was about to say not as old.
Nick does not have the sunken eyes.
But I do have the oblong head. I could be like, so, Mr. Quinn, it appears that your research is suspect. And then you'd have to be like, oh, Dr. Hoffman, here! Because I am, in fact, Dr. Hoffman. Look at all this.
Hopefully you're not going to be carrying around your own severed head and getting up to no good with it.
Hey, man, he gets pretty far. He makes it out.
The zombie that wants to eat something other than brains.
Oh boy, Matt, that's over the line. That is over a line right there. I'm not sure what line, but it's over one.
This movie is over the line. That's why it's considered a horror comedy.
You don't have to be dead to eat someone out. Also, at that point, it's rape. That's the big thing. Because he's technically alive and aware of his actions, and she's just another squirming person on a table. There's a lot of weird stuff here. If you asked me, hey, Nick, did you expect a decapitated head to lick a woman's breast? I would have said no. But that's also just my general motto in life.
Well, I wouldn't have expected that scene with the blood bag in that little tray that he's in.
One of my favorite, I mean, if this is funny, if this is supposed to be funny, which I guess it's supposed to be according to Matt, there's a scene where the body, oh God, from Futurama, it's Spiro Agnew, Vice President Agnew is just the body walking around, right, Sudsy?
Oh yeah.
Wikipedia calls it a 1985 American comedy horror film.
Headless body of Agnew brings the woman in and tears her shirt off. And I'm just like, go on, movie. What could you be trying to say here? It's just the idea. And then the way that they get away with this is he takes the headless body of Agnew, takes the head off of the skeletal, like, display body, I guess you'd say, and he dresses up like a surgeon. If this was supposed to be a comedy, it's right in this scene. I also, and I'll just throw it out here, because we just did a horror that also just ripped off the Bernard Herrmann Psycho score. This is all just the Psycho music.
I think in the credits they say, with apologies to the guy who scored Psycho. Yeah, they even admitted it.
Well, I
But
mean, the opening credit sequence, which is also great, is a ripoff of Saul Bass. So what are you going to
yep.
do?
But they literally have the dun 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 dun. Which again, neither here nor there. It's just this movie. Personally, Stuart Gordon goes up to me as like, what's his name? Mark Bouchard from American Movie, made good.
Mm,
Like, if you were an independent guy who wanted to write horror and make horror, Stuart Gordon's kind of your guy. Like, he clearly went producer to producer, paycheck to paycheck, script to script, made crazy stuff that broke even plus just a little so he could make his next one. And so, like, is it B movie crap? Yeah, this is kind of the most B movie stuff we've ever done. And yet, there's not a lot I'd cut. It's a tight movie. It does exactly what it needs to do. It's just, I don't know if I wish he had a big break or not. I just wish he was more known. Like, Sam Raimi got the break, right?
we talked about this on the previous episode about his big break. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Both he and Brian Usna get a producer writing credit. I think they get a writing credit on it, but
And
that
didn't
was
he
supposed to be
direct
their
it
big
too?
day. He was going to, but then he got sick, and they went with someone else who
Right.
actually did go on to have a pretty long career in Hollywood. So
I think he got story credit and they both got producer credits.
I think that sounds right.
But it's just I love this kind of mentality. Like, here's the thing. Sofia Coppola can make great films, and I like some of them, especially Lost in Translation. It's just that I don't feel it's the same kind of thing. I like this working class, like, I'm gonna make a movie, here's what the movie is, and it's got character and weight. And again, Sam Raimi just made a couple Marvel movies, which were, the first few were good. He made good. Who would have thought the guy who made Evil Dead could make something that great? It's just, we rarely give people a chance anymore, you know?
Yeah, you're right.
The one that I use when I was teaching my class about the last 20 years, what's the director's name? Chloe Zhao is the one I use an example of. She's made some incredible films, right? She made Songs My Brothers Taught Me, she made The Writer, and then Nomadland was one of the best films of 2020. And then Marvel's like, you know what you should do? You should direct The Eternals.
Oh, and
And
that did not go well.
well, because it doesn't look like her, right? Nowadays, we homogenize directors who make interesting stuff. And now it's just like, when that Doctor Strange movie came out, and they were like, wow, Sam Raimi got to be Sam Raimi. He got to be Sam Raimi for about 7 minutes of that 2-hour movie, right?
Yeah.
Stuart Gordon made masterful nonsense, and I like that. I love these movies because they feel like someone had a crazy idea. And again, that's if you're interested in this shit, watch American Movie, because that's what Mark Bouchard does. And he has interesting shots and he has interesting ideas. But sometimes if you're not in the right audience, you end up making a podcast called Myopia Movies, and you get an audience and some people like it. It's just not going to end up being the next We Hate Movies or the Flophouse or whatever. We just have fun doing what we do. And that's kind of what I get with Stuart Gordon. He'd probably be a really good guy to drink a Pabst with, but these movies are insane. He's like, but what if there was, say, 80% more blood than Jim Cameron ever used?
Well, these days, I don't think he'd be a good guy to share a Pabst with unless you've got some reagent. He unfortunately passed away in 2020.
He did.
But
Wow.
before then, you're right.
Yeah, I love these kind of weird directors, and like that's why Scorsese was right. Marvel movies are roller coaster, but also if all of movies are a theme park, Scorsese is that ride that's like a little bit dangerous that only the people who know ride, right? Like it's not mainstream, and that's kind of why I like it. And that's what Stuart Gordon was. If you're in the Atlanta area, he's their knockoff of the Haunted Mansion. You're just like, oh, this is just a janky ride. Oh, what the fuck was that? And that's what's going on. And I love
Stuart
that about
Gordon,
him.
Stuart Gordon is the action park of Hollywood, basically.
Yeah. Isn't that I mean, do you have a better definition for that, Sudsy?
No, honestly, I don't.
Yeah, but what if the water slide did a flip? You're like, that shouldn't happen. He goes, it shouldn't, but it's gonna.
Oh yeah, your back getting broken.
It's like the Hong Kong Jackie Chan pictures where the plot is as thin as a piece of paper, but he's just like, but what if I fought people with a ladder? And you're just like, that doesn't seem safe. And he's like, it's not. And they're gonna make it anyway. It's just, God help me. And that's why people who know film watch this shit, and people who don't just end up watching like Scream 3, and you're like, hey, Jay and Silent Bob are here, so it must have some indie cred. And you're just like, you don't get film, do you? Anyway, so by this point in Reanimator, we're watching, Megan yell at him for like, you shouldn't do this. And he's like, yes, but what about possibilities? And you're just like, possibilities? Are you going to bring bacon back to life? And he goes, no. The possibilities. I do like here, again, it's 20 years, or it's maybe 6 years before, but I like how the evil professor shows up looking like he's the guy from X-Files. Like he looks like a shadowy agent. He almost looks like the cigarette smoking man showing up, stealing the information. Like we're in a latter-day X-Files episode about rejiggering life. I don't know. It's crazy. And I also just like how Wes is the shortest man who's ever lived, and everyone towers over him. It makes it work even better.
It's like Marty McFly and Doc. Marty's got to stand on a box in order to be in the same frame.
And just because we're teasing shit, Daniel's first movie was going to be Reanimator. My first movie, Back to the Future, baby. I am as mainstream as you can imagine. I've seen, according to like Letterboxd, like 1,300 films. We're going Back to the Future, baby. Oh God, that's gonna be a 2-hour episode. We're just gonna have fun. But yeah,
looking forward to that one. Well,
right?
At this, great Scott! Get ready for a lot of bad Christopher Lloyd with that.
Are you telling me you reanimated a corpse with its blowing goo?
Oh yeah. Which is basically the conversation that Dr. Hill has with Herbert West, because Dr. Hill finds out that Dr. Halsey is actually dead. He goes to steal Herbert's formula, and then Herbert kills him with a shovel. He whacks him over the head and then decapitates him. And it's this really great sequence because the body, after the head comes off, is still like twitching and in its death throes. And you see the head roll. It's got kind of a good makeup effect. I'm surprised that Tom Savini wasn't involved.
Yeah, I don't know who did it, but it looks great. And he even does the thing where he brings across the head the camera. He doesn't quite show the eyes, but it's dripping. I will say there's only one scene that make you realize it's fake, which we'll talk about here in a second. But like, it's so smooth. Like the camera is not full slow-mo, it's maybe 3/4 speed, but like the guy's like, the implications. We could have a whole clone high school. And like, but like behind him, West is drawing back like it's the count is 3 and 2. Smoltzy is winding up and there's a fastball down the middle and he just winds back and whoop, bang, dude. And from behind, we just see this, like you said, this gray suit with the overcoat, and it's just twitching. And this head, and this is where, again, if Matt's reading TV tropes like he claims to do rather than, actually watch the film.
I actually watched the film. Sorry, Nick.
I'm sure you did. But they put it in like a surgeon tray, which just looks like a steamer tray from restaurant use. But the
or
head
those things
just
you
keeps...
put paint in and the roller.
Huh?
The thing you put paint in, then you put the roller in it.
Right, exactly. But the head just keeps falling forward. So he gets the thing you'd put paper towels on and impales the head on it. And again, while he's doing it, It squooshes down like a squeezy ball, and it's the best.
And it still retains consciousness and memory because he's like, you bastard.
Well, that's after he's injected with ecto cooler, you see.
Well, that's a great moment, though. That is a great moment of acting on David Gale's part.
It's all good. I also want to just question everything here, because why does he inject the body with stuff?
Because he's never done whole parts.
Pride
Sounds
comes
like he's
before
a
the
fluffer
fall.
at the end of sorry, what'd you say, Matt?
Pride comes before the fall. I mean, this whole section is a West blackmails Dan, Hill blackmails West, West kills Hill, then Hill's body beats West unconscious and takes all his stuff. Everyone is just doing unto everyone what they just did to each other. It's like a Congo line.
And somewhere around here, Meg breaks up with Dan.
As you would.
Of course.
Is this before or after she hits him a bunch of times?
Oh yes, the she's my sister, she's my daughter bit. No, where Dan's explaining that her dad died and the only reason he's moving around is because of Herbert's experiments.
And she just hits him like 4 or 5 times. Like, yeah, you deserve that.
I mean, yeah, and this is also when we see the dad in like a cage, like he's Hannibal Lecter. He's just like, and they're like, what did he do to him? He goes, he gave him a lobotomy. Hey, yeah. I mean, the last 30 minutes of this movie is just the most unhinged thing I've ever seen, possibly. I don't know what to tell you. Like,
it's pretty out there. I mean, for a they actually managed. They get like 5 extras to be zombies plus Dr. Hill, and they managed to make it seem like it's a lot bigger and grander, and like they had a much higher budget than they actually did.
Yeah, I mean, so let's just set this table here. The body knocks out West, and so now body and head are one and the same. Megan has visited her father. She is shocked. Shocked! Dean finds West unconscious, and he's wearing a shirt that's supposed to be like a Nike sports shirt, but it says Mike, and there's like, it doesn't say Nike, it says Mike, and it's got like a weird swoosh, but it's the wrong way, which is awesome. And they're like,
I got it from that Russian outlet store. Crazy Clav's Shoe Emporium.
It's where I got the movie Space Preserves. Ghost Dusters. And at this point, and we should also mention here too, West is like freaking out because all of the reagent is gone. And then he realizes what's going on, so he laughs like a pervert. The head doesn't, like, the head is just a head. So what it needs is blood. And constantly it needs fresh blood, oxygenated blood, because it can't really breathe.
Yeah, they never explain how the head can talk because it doesn't have lungs.
No, and it keeps having to be re-injected with reagent, right? And they, like, literally at one point, one of my favorite bits of this, because it makes no sense, is the head, like Lurch, literally just brings the head in that steamer tray into the office that just says Dr. Hill, and he like, rah! And goes into like a little mini fridge, and the mini fridge has blood samples as though he was also a secret vampire. Like, why else would there just be blood samples in his office? It's amazing.
Because Dr. Hill's a freak.
Oh yes, I need it when I'm taking the daughters of my colleagues. I need young blood so I can achieve an erection. You know, Viagra was still 10 years away.
I went to brunch and ordered a Bloody Mary, and they didn't do it correctly. So from here on out, I'm making my own.
Boo that man. See, so the trick about a good bloody, this is just, you know, on this week on Diners, Diamonds, and Dimes, Dr. Hill's going to tell us how to make a proper Bloody Mary. Rockin'. So the thing is, you see, I can't just get a Bloody Mary the way I like it. So I get a Russian nice and drunk, and I drink his blood. Rockin'! That would be good with donkey sauce. And you're just like, oh, Guy. Oh, Guy Fieri. Oh, God.
Man, oh, man. So, yeah, they're back in the morgue in the finale, and Hill's body had kidnapped Meg, and that's where we get the whole, I guess you could call it iconic at this point in time.
Well, first, so Jesse, the body Ventura, shows up, and he's like, hey there, buddy. You know, I've got your father, and your father, brain dead now, buddy. So what I've done is I've taken him out, and I'm going to make him my slave. And so all of a sudden, there's a whole bunch of zombie slaves. I also think they took out the dad's teeth, which is weird. But just to show how 1980s comedy this is, there's this I don't know, security guard, and he's reading Boudoir magazine like you would if you were working, and he's smoking like a cigarello, and he's like, Dr. Hill, you're working late, and he goes, yes, I am, because he's the head in the bag, and then one of the ear falls off. And they go into surgery.
I wish I knew how. I wish I knew how they did that makeup with the head in the bag and then the body working around. I mean, I assume it's a double, but see, that's the sort of great stuff. It's like also making you ask, how did they do that? I think Evil Dead kind of does too, and the people that do that end up going to work on special effects themselves.
I know this is an old bit, because it's an old bit, but I mean, I imagine the way they did it was essentially the way they do Sweetums the Muppet, where they have someone who's 5'6", and then they build a thing that has like fake shoulders on top of that. But this would be a great Muppet remake.
Oh, who would the one human be?
The black security guard.
Meg, maybe.
Oh, I like Nick suggesting the black security guard.
No, I mean, the one person has to be Dean. Right? Like, it just has to be played by Neil Patrick Harris as Doogie Howser.
Can we get a Kermit then as Herbert West in this scenario?
Ooh, solid choice.
No, actually, I take it back. The Great Gonzo is Herbert West.
That was going to be my joke.
And so Kermit would be Dan then?
Who would Kermit be?
Because Kermit's always the main character.
Nowadays, they're trying to keep Herman. I mean, you're right, but I think they're trying to make him more, not minimal, but he can't be the lead. Who could be the lead? That guy? No, Herbert needs to be that guy who blinks. You know what I'm talking about? The guy who in like the Muppet Show has like glasses and then eyes that can just like flip out. Or God help me, that's funny. Fozzie's like, ah! Fozzie could be Dean. What, you did what? Whoa! Oh God, I can't. I know I introduced this bit, but I realized how dark it became halfway through. The Dean could be Dr. Teeth. Oh man, you made me a zombie? Wow.
That's not cool.
Outrageous. And then Megan can be Janice, just be like, oh wow. You brought my dad back, but at what cost? For sure. Because the dad busts through the door and knocks Dean out around here.
Oh, yeah, because he somehow regains his senses halfway through this climactic battle where the zombies have all been lobotomized and Hill's controlling them. But Dean Halsey comes back to his senses and then goes after... is he the one that crushes Dr. Hill's head?
Yeah, Halsey's the one who finishes Dr. Hill.
That's right, even though somehow he comes back in the sequel. I don't know how.
Because my comment a couple of times, when Dr. Halsey wakes up, the first person he tries to strangle is Dan. So I'm like, okay, you know that's Dr. Halsey is in there because he just hates Dan. Right. At this point, he finally realizes his priorities need to be in order, and he goes after Hill. And smush.
Yeah, and then the body is destroyed when West injects it with extra reagent, and then the guts explode out, and seemingly Herbert West dies too.
Yeah, it's like the dog in The Thing here. Prehensile guts just engulf him.
It's something else. But yeah, and then somehow Meg actually died throughout all of this.
Because Dan, bad decision number 20 at this point, when Herbert is dying, he tells him to save his research. So Dan runs back and grabs the satchel, which slows them down just long enough for a zombie to get into the elevator and strangle Meg, which I did not buy that she was actually dead. She goes from screaming loudly to dead in like 2 seconds.
Well, of course she's not really dead.
Wait. What do you mean you didn't buy that she was dead?
Because when you strangle someone, my understanding is you lose conscious and then you keep strangling them and then you die. She goes straight from screaming to dead in like a second.
Are you saying you don't trust the woman's acting, or you don't believe the movie? Because it's a shitty B movie. I mean, I enjoyed it. I'm not saying it's whatever. So I don't understand what you mean. Like, are you saying like this movie's trying to trick you? Like, I don't get your critique.
Probably been better if it just snapped her neck.
I thought that's what they did.
Yeah, something grabs her neck so hard she loses consciousness. And then what I think is a very effective scene. Like, this is why I don't understand what you're talking about. Because this is the one death that they actually spend time on, right? Like, so clearly something's going wrong. There's ambulances, there's fire trucks, there's police everywhere. He carries this woman's corpse covered in blood upstairs. The hand skitters away like it's Thing, which is great. And then he throws her on an emergency room like bed. They're trying to resurrect her. They like I don't know what you're saying the trick is. Like, it's like you don't understand the film. Like, it's so strange that you're like, but what if the Prestige? I don't get what you're saying at all. Anyway, she's fucking dead. Now we have the moral quandary of the movie. What would you do? The love of your life is dead. You've seen what this reagent can do. Do you bring her back or not? And funny enough, Sudsy, you've chosen a movie that reminds us of the end of the previous season, because this is very much like how Pet Sematary is.
Yep.
Right? So like I still don't necessarily get why Matt's saying like it feels fake. This to me is supposed to be the moral center of the movie. If you were given all the information you were given, if there was a chance that the love of your life could be saved, would you do it? And that's
I know she's dead. The point is it doesn't seem like she's screaming and screaming and screaming, it just falls over.
Well, I thought again that they snapped her neck.
Yeah.
They didn't just strangle her.
Yeah, that they grabbed her by the neck in a way that either pushed the bone structure into her throat or something. Because what I thought they had done is not necessarily, as a doctor, I'm going to disagree with Daniel. I think what they said was that they grabbed her throat and crushed it in a way, because when they were trying to intubate her, which is, if you don't know what intubation is, they stick a tube down your throat to force air in. They said it was obstructed because that the bone structure in her windpipe had been crushed.
Okay, that would make more sense.
It would, because that's what they said.
I don't remember that. I thought they just kept trying to administer CPR and it didn't work.
But what had happened is the airwave had been broken, or the air passage had been broken rather. She couldn't get air. And after being exasperated, because when your heart is beating super fast, you need more oxygen. So she asphyxiates, she dies. They can't bring her back because her windpipe had been crushed.
Except they inject her with reagent. And the final shot of the movie, like said, is fades to black except for the goo. And then that goes in, we hear a scream, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, she screams. She's not one of the famous scream queens, but she's got a good scream.
That she does.
I almost wanted it to go full like camp at the end and just play a 50s song while she's like, my boyfriend's back or something, you know?
There you go.
Yeah. Anyway, Sudsy, it's your show. So how do we end this thing?
Well, we've been talking for about an hour now. Let's go ahead and go around the room and give final thoughts. Let's start with you, Mr. Quinn. What did you think of having talked about it, having seen it for the first time? What did you think?
It was interesting. It wasn't boring. And although, as we talked earlier, that one scene is what most people talk about, but that's not most of the movie at all. Most of the movie is Herbert West being a bad influence on Dan and faculty politics with zombies.
It sounds like a perfect setting for your next book, frankly. What is it they say? Write what you know? All right. And
Yeah,
Mr. Hoffman.
The cookies, the PTA had reagent in them.
Ah, there you go. Dr. Hoffman.
So
Anything else you want to touch on?
I just want to just toss out to people look, horror is such a strange genre, because what it's supposed to do is either shock and surprise or reach our inner fears, and we've seen a lot of that lately. Even hell, as millennials, Five Nights at Freddy's are fucking with our nostalgia, right? Just as an example. So what's interesting to me about this is, on one hand, it's cartoonish absurdism, right? Because it takes Frankenstein, one of the original Universal horror pictures, and then turns it up to 12. And it's just because they even do the electricity. And it's almost we didn't really talk about this, but the first scene we have outside of Transylvania, wherever the fuck West is from, is this overweight woman with her boobs facing all over the place, getting electroshock therapy. Not electroshock therapy. They're trying to bring her back with she needs fibrillation. She has the defibrillator on her. And it's almost you know what you thought Frankenstein was about? Electricity. Well, fuck you. You need magic green goo. And from that point on, it just gets more and more absurd. There's I'm sure fan fiction with it, but what if we needed a zombie army and then electricity was needed, so we just manipulate everyone? It's so over the top. It's so silly. It's so unnecessarily bloody. This is a shockumentary horror that could be at a drive-in theater. But that's what Stuart Gordon is, man. We don't have a lot of directors like this anymore. I love this shit. It's so much fun. This is an oeuvre that doesn't exist anymore. Get a bunch of actors that just look the part, like Tim Burton, where their face is the special effect, and make a movie that's kind of weird. Yeah, H.P. Lovecraft is a problematic person, but the psychology gets to a very fundamental place with storytelling. I think this movie hits the right spots. So good call, Sudsy. Good start to our Dan-tastic month.
Well, thank you very much. And I agree with pretty much everything you said. It's so interesting how they managed to combine so many different elements with such a small budget than a lot of bigger budget mainstream horror films. And a lot of that just has to do with the practical effects. And I won't bang on any more about this movie because we've got 3 others to cover this month in our Dan-tastic month. Nick, what's up next in the docket? I honestly forget what I picked.
Oh, don't you worry. I'm rapidly trying to pull it up right now. So
while we're waiting for that, Matt, is there anything you want to plug? What's your most recent book?
Battle for the Wastelands 2, Serpent Sword. Transcontinental Dirigible Airborne Assault for the win.
All right.
Also, check out my Substack.
We'll put that in the description. And Nick, you've got a couple of new podcasts going on, right?
Yeah, so if you want to hear me talk literary and fancy, like I know you do, ladies and gentlemen, look up Required Reading. We've charted in some 25 countries at this point, and we've talked everything. And by the time you hear this, we've done an episode this season on The Bourne Identity and one on World War Z. And we've got a lot of interesting stuff coming. Speaking of next things coming, so to speak, next week, we're going to visit a very special League of Extraordinary.
Oh boy, this one is one I've been wanting to talk about for a while. It's the complete 180 for me on whereas as much as I love Reanimator, I hate that movie, but it's going to be a fun time. I think we both know a fan that hopefully will be able to get on to talk about it with us. And in the meantime, thank you very much for joining us. Check us out on the socials wherever you can. We're on Facebook. Are we still on Twitter? Were we ever on Twitter?
I am on Twitter, yes.
All right, check us out on Twitter and check out Matt's Substack. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for reviewing us. Thanks for downloading us. And we will see you next week.
Thanks, everyone. Myopia Movies is a podcast production of Dude Letter Podcasting and is produced by Nick Hoffman. It is edited by Nerd Trinette and Daniel Suttis and is hosted by Nick Hoffman, with production assistance by Matthew Quinn, Daniel Suttis, and Nerd Trinette. The theme song is Surf Shimmy by Kevin MacLeod from Incomptech.com. Licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 4 license, Creative Commons /licenses by /4.0. Thanks.